What's up, Vetters? Patrick here with Vetted. I have an amazing interview to share with y'all today. I was able to sit down with Paul Hynek, who is the son of J. Allen Hynek. Joseph Allen Hynek was an American astronomer, professor, and ufologist. He is perhaps best remembered for his UFO research. Hynek acted as scientific advisor to UFO studies undertaken by the U.S. Air Force under three projects: Project Sign, Project Grudge, and Project Blue Book. Now, I'm going to keep this intro short so we can get to this interview, but the thing about J. Allen Hynek is he's just one of the most central figures in ufology of all time. So to be able to sit down with his son was quite an experience, and I have to admit, I've never met anyone like Paul Hynek in this community before. Get ready for a crazy interview, y'all. Enjoy. All right, betters, look who I have in the house, Mr. Paul Hynek. Welcome, Paul.
Hello, Patrick. Happy to be here.
Excellent. Have you seen or heard of Vetted before, or is this your first time?
I am unvetted.
Unvetted. I love it. That's awesome. Well, look, I have heard of you, and I've heard of your father, of course. Do you think, just to start off, I got a bunch of notes here, but do you think you would be in ufology if your father hadn't?
I've not really thought about that. I'd like to think I'd have at least more than a passing interest, because wherever you fall on, let's call it a belief spectrum, it's one of the most important questions there is. So I'd like to think I wouldn't shirk it, even if I wasn't brought up in a UFO household.
Sure. Yeah, no, it's and of course it's hard to actually know that, right? But just always curious. I always think about our paths, and are we a product of, where we're born and the household we're brought up in and the environment, right? It affects us, no matter what. I find that fascinating, to be honest. Do you think your dad, what would your dad say to the state of ufology like right now? You think he would be happy with things, how they've gone since, he was in it back in, we're going back a long time ago. What do you think?
Fair to middling. I think he'd be gratified to know that some of the contributions he's made have lasted, the close encounter system, et cetera, and sort of the legitimacy that he brought to the party. And the attitude of the public pronouncements of the United States Navy, essentially saying, hey, we see these things in the air, we see them in the water, we're concerned about the safety of our aviators, we could use a hand. That's a diametrically different attitude than the Air Force of my father's day, who would always say, nothing to see here, we got this, please disperse. But, apart from that, we've kind of inched forward. We've got an increasing cadence of seemingly credible whistleblowers, but we haven't, really made what I would consider substantial progress.
That's interesting. Yeah, I guess it just depends on what aspect you're talking about. Was there progress? Have we gone back? So maybe in some ways we've moved forward, in other ways we've been stagnant or haven't moved forward. What would you, what would you say is the best piece of evidence or event or what would you say to someone like you're trying to, tell them, hey, this is a real thing, this is happening? What would you say, like, currently up to this point is the best piece of evidence or something? I don't know how to describe what I'm saying, but you know what I mean? Like today.
Yeah, well, I had a debate online with now my friend Michael Shermer, who is the founder of Skeptic Magazine.
Yeah.
And the way I framed that was reasonable people can conclude that there is a phenomena or not. I don't begrudge people who poo-poo it. I think the more you study it, the more you come to the realization that something likely is happening that, let's say, is meta-terrestrial, at least beyond our current understanding, and to me, likely beyond our current secret military capabilities. Not necessarily extraterrestrial, and we can get more into that if you want, But for me, it's not so much about this or that case or a particular whistleblower, but about the accumulated weight of the evidence of dozens and dozens of cases with credible witnesses who don't go on book tours afterwards, who have nothing to gain, who have their stories corroborated by other witnesses and radar and photography. And when you add up all those things and the reading between the lines pronouncements of the government in various papers saying that this is a national security issue, and as I mentioned, what the Navy says, you add all that up and it seems clear there's something happening, whether it's extraterrestrial or something else and something else. I don't know. Somebody quipped a while ago that I trust those who are seeking and I'm skeptical of those who have found. And I like that because I've met hundreds of people in my lifetime who claim to have ongoing discussions with Zorg from Zeta Reticuli and have these concrete pronouncements of what's happening, etc. And many of them are mutually contradictory. So they can't all be true. And I don't pretend to have answers. I just like to fancy that I have some better questions than I did yesterday.
Yeah, I like that. No, I like the way you put it. Yeah, I couldn't agree more, to be honest. I always say there's two questions sort of to enter this topic, which is, are we alone in the universe? And then the bigger question, because they're not connected to me, have we been visited, on this earth, right? I feel those are two different things, because I feel like the first question, people are pretty much, why are we alone, right? But then the second one becomes, this is where, the rubber meets the road, per se. What are some other questions like that we should be asking, right? Like, so to say UFOs are real, okay, well, that just means unidentified flying object. I mean, it doesn't mean alien, right? But some people connect UFO with alien. So how do we separate these questions and try to, build the blocks of what this all could be?
Yeah, you're right, Patrick. I mean, there's a knee-jerk tendency to ascribe the extraterrestrial hypothesis to UFOs. And part of that's propelled by Hollywood because that's a nice, fun, convenient thing to talk about. And also, along with that, is a rather aggressive, hostile, dystopian view because you need drama in Hollywood. If you made a movie called Village of the Nice, Happy Alien People, you might not get a bunch of butts in seats. So, but the bottom line is, if we are indeed being visited by, let's say, extraterrestrials, at worst, they are manipulating us. Because if they can come here from other planets, their technology is vastly superior to ours. And if they had truly hostile intentions, we would know, or should I say we wouldn't know because we'd be dead.
Yeah.
Or on battery farms like in the Matrix. So, and one of the things that I quibble with is, well, first of all, and I agree with you. I think the universe has many other civilizations. But if they're coming here, first of all, how do they find us? It's no easy matter. The universe is vast. And yes, we've been beaming episodes of I Love Lucy these many decades, but it's just not easy to find us. And then if they come all this way, why aren't they more overt? Now, many people think, okay, they're doing hybrid programs and all these things, but it seems a little bit sneaky and clunky and to me. But also, if they are flying in the skies and we're seeing crafts from other planets, it seems like these crafts are exhibiting flight capabilities not light years beyond us, but maybe 50 years, 100 years beyond us, where they can handle 8G or go, accelerate at right angles and things like that. Yeah. Our best guess is that the Earth is 5 billion years old, that the universe is 14 billion years old. So that means that other civilizations could be not hundreds, not thousands, millions, but billions of years more advanced than us. So the idea that there is a civilization, much less several, that are coming here with technology dozens of years past us is rather improbable to me.
Wow. Yeah, I never heard it put that way, to be honest with you. I like that. Yeah, I mean, you also have to wonder, like, are these alien civilizations doing the same thing to other planets like they are to humans and Earth, right? And if we're just a grain of sand in this beach, why us, right? Like, we can't really be that special. We have no proof of that, so why lean on that, right?
Yeah.
Right? Why try to leverage that into our theory if there's, you know? So yeah, and again, is it single species, multiple species with different intentions, agendas? What's going on? Yeah, I agree. It's these inconsistencies that you know, these walls you come up against. That's why I asked, like, what's the best evidence? What are the anchors to hang on to in this topic, right? Because there's so much current in the water that'll move us around. So what do we anchor ourselves to?
And I think it's really good to separate the evidence suggesting a metaterrestrial phenomena or various phenomena
Yeah.
from what it is. You know, we are pattern-seeking mammals, and it's a intellectually awkward resting point for many people to say, hey, yeah, I've looked at the evidence, there's something going on here, and I don't know what it is, and I'm okay with that. You know, it may have been Richard Feynman who said that there are two kinds of people in the world: those who are okay with questions they cannot answer, and those who are not okay with their answers being questioned. I think that sort of separates the world into two camps. And a lot of people will not lean into the UFO phenomena or another, call it supernatural phenomena, because they don't have a ready-made answer. And so what I try to do is to get people to say, hey, look, do you believe there's enough evidence with Air Force pilots and et cetera, that something weird is happening? Yes. But I don't know where they come from. I don't know what they eat or how they get here or why they dress like that. You don't need to have answers to admit that, yes, there's something happening here. Let's find out together. And that's where I try to get people to go, because a lot of people will shy away because they can't put that square answer in that square hole.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Yeah, it seems like that's maybe the anchor, right? There are some things we can all agree on, which is, well, hopefully, right? The majority. There's definitely something happening. What is that thing, right? It's definitely worth looking into, investigating, studying. And that's where the nuance comes in, right? How much resources to put towards this effort, whether it be privately, that's subjective. That's up for people to do what they want with their lives. But when you get the government involved in taxpayer dollars, now you're talking about, right, a sort of democratic approach to the resources that we, right, put towards this. So what are your thoughts on that? Like, how much resources should we be putting towards this topic?
That's a good question. Well, like I said, it's one of the most important questions there is. So I think it deserves some tax dollars.
Definitely.
It's an existential issue for us. You know, there are many people who believe that there are aliens here now. I don't know that, and I don't know if the U.S. government has alien bodies and or crafts in hangars that they're working to reverse engineer the propulsion systems for. I don't know, and I don't care. I don't care what the U.S. government has, says, or does. But, you know, it's part of our manifest destiny.
Yeah.
To explore the heavens and explore the possibility that the heavens have come here.
Yeah. That's a great point.
It's not, you know, people with space issues overall, people will say things like, why are we spending money on rockets when we have homeless on the streets? These aren't either or things. We don't only do one thing. We multitask. And I would say that legitimate research into this most perplexing phenomena is warranted.
Yeah, that's a good point. You know, you got me thinking about just with saying manifest destiny, it's like, well, who's manifest destiny, right? Like humanity, Americans, the government, the people, right? Like it starts to you start to question what is the role of a government, right? And how far do they go for some of or is that more of a private conquest rather than a
Ah,
government conquest, and who's in charge? You know what I mean? Like that's why privately, people that want to look into this, I support, right? Because it's not
yeah.
up to any of that, right? To that sense. So yeah, it just, that's the thing with this topic. The moment you start talking about it, you can just start pulling so many threads and start asking so many questions and make you start to question a lot, which, to be fair, I like that. I like the challenge. I always say I live in the land of I don't know, and I'm okay with that. I don't, I'm in that other camp, those two questions you had. I'm okay with not knowing things. In fact, I prefer it that way. The idea of reaching a wall of knowledge in the end, and I know that sounds boring to me. I like not knowing what's around the corner,
Ah,
or right.
well, I envy you, Patrick, because you live in the land of I don't know. I live in the suburb of no idea.
Yeah.
So I'd like to move there to the sunny shores someday.
Yeah. Oh, that's hilarious. Yeah. Well, I'd say I go visit that suburb too every once in a while.
Yeah, you're always welcome. Don't have a
Yeah.
lot to offer,
Yeah.
dread and angst, but yeah, you're welcome.
That's hilarious. Yeah. I mean, earlier we were talking about, you know, growing up, right? If you were to be in this topic, had you not had the father you had, right?
Yeah.
What what was that sort of childhood like in that? Were you always, was that all the conversation at home? Were you sort of brought in as a mentor, as a young child? Like, I'm curious how that worked for you, or there was no influence at all.
Well, from the age of 3, my father would ask me detailed questions for advice on what he should do.
Really? Oh
No,
my!
no.
That's hilarious.
Um,
You sold that. That was
yeah, I
great.
did. My tail could be my lip quivering, and I tried to hold it. Yeah, well, I don't know life without UFOs, but in this context, people think of my father as a UFO guy. He was an astronomer and an astrophysicist who had a late in life side hustle of UFOs. So it wasn't like he viewed everything through a UFO prism, or all of our conversations devolved or evolved to UFOs. A lot of them were about eclipses and, just science overall, and a inquisitive mindset to the world. And then, we'd have Travis Walton over for dinner, or Father Gill, or somebody else. And, there'd be a flap or a big case, and it would get white hot and talk about UFOs. And it was a very open topic. By the time that I was reasonably sentient, Project Blue Book was over, and my father could talk freely. So it was just super cool. It was a very fun environment. I have really cool siblings, and both my parents were awesome. And UFOs is just a really fun thing to talk about with somebody who had a front row seat to the phenomena.
Yeah, front row seat. That is putting it lightly. Absolutely. What were your father's conclusions at the end? Like, what was his opinion? Like, was he just full on 100%? We have been visited on this planet, or did he even think like that in those sort of terms? Or
I think that terminology is problematic.
yeah,
I think he would say there's a phenomena, there's a real phenomena here. He didn't particularly cotton to the extraterrestrial hypothesis, as it really going to rankle an astrophysicist.
Yeah.
And so he and Jacques Vallée and others thought about other solutions, other provenances like interdimensional or time travel. And I lean towards the interdimensional. To me, it answers the two biggest questions. How do they know we're here? And why do they care? Because they're kind of here, or they're adjacent, and maybe they're related to us in some way. And that also that could explain how they would blink in and out like a Cheshire cat.
Sure.
So visiting the planet, maybe they're here on the planet, or could be subterranean. Maybe there are Nazis underneath Antarctica for all I know. It sounds kind of fun. But so, I think he would say that, and he did say, there is a real phenomena here, and we just don't know what it is.
Yeah, right on. That's fair. That's fair. I mean, that's how I feel now, to be honest. I was watching, before we jumped on, I have found this crazy video on YouTube that had like 500 views. Maybe there's other videos of it, but your father was on a show called To Tell the Truth.
Yeah.
Game show. And
right.
It was great. And it got me thinking, yeah, there's some laughs in the show, but to be honest, the topic was kind of approached like I wouldn't maybe not say seriously, but it wasn't like it was laughed at. And it makes me wonder about the path that the stigma of UFOs has taken. It almost makes me think at the beginning it was kind of like, okay, maybe this is something kind of reasonable. And then it took a dip down where the stigma really starts to hit. And then you might argue it's kind of, the stigma's going away a little bit. People are okay to talk about it now. I mean, I have all kinds of conversations with people who aren't into this at all, serious conversations about it. So I don't know. What do you think of that? What do you feel about that?
Well, first I got to say, that episode was sponsored by Prel, and you could use some Prel in your hair because it's a little bit unruly right now, Patrick. I just got to say. So yeah, it's an interesting idea about, that was right after the era of like ray guns and little green men and all that, right? But it's a fact that the government has engaged in paid disinformation campaigns to make the phenomena seem ludicrous and ridiculous. And, I think I don't begrudge them that. But I think they kind of ran out of steam with that. And now, like you said, I remember in the 70s, people were very uncomfortable, especially before the movie Close Encounters, which kind of gave people permission to talk about it. Now, it's almost as if, you don't have a seat at the table if you don't have some kind of alien or UFO tale to share. People are very open. And also, I think it's part and parcel of culture now that people are much less ashamed of things that we would have thought before are tawdry or notorious. It's some kind of marker of distinction that you have something interesting to talk about, even if it is kind of would have been scandalous before.
Yeah, that's interesting. It just got me thinking about it. Not that it really matters. I mean, I don't know how you control that to begin with, but so you think Close Encounters coming out, which your father famously had a cameo in, right? That movie coming out, like you said, gives people permission, quote unquote, to talk about. Well, it's been 52 years, I think, since that movie came out in 1973. If I could be wrong of the year, but
77.
77. Okay. Yeah, you're right. Okay. So close to 50 years since that movie came out. That may have died off. I'm sure there's a lot of people that don't even know about that movie, as crazy as that is to say. What's the new Close Encounters right now that gave people permission to sort of talk about it?
Well, I think the TV show Project Blue Book was in that vein as well. But there's just been a lot of documentaries and a lot of programs, and Spielberg's working on another movie now. So there's a continuing flood. I mean, zombies and aliens are popular. They sell in Hollywood. So there will always be movies. And again, largely with a hostile bent because they need drama.
That's true.
It's like in the movie E.T., which was at the time the highest grossing movie of all time, there wasn't really drama with the alien, but they had to have drama with the other humans. So there's got to be some bad actor in there somewhere.
I mean, there has to be tension, right, for the film, a problem that needs a solution. So that's it. I mean, that's interesting. Well, Close Encounters did a great job of the tension came from just the unknown and him discovering it. But once the discovery was made, they were friendly.
And there was the little matter of kidnapping, but it was kinder, gentler kidnapping.
Totally.
Nobody was harmed in the kidnapping.
Yeah. That's back when you could do that. So this new movie that Spielberg has, a lot of people are comparing it to something in the vein of Close Encounters, right? So you got the screenwriter from Jurassic Park, David Koepp, I think is how you say his name, writing this. I don't know. What do you feel like? Do you think this movie could have some sort of impact? And have they asked you at all to come on and consult for that? That seems like,
no, not involved in the project, at least yet. And who knows? We just have so many more, back then in the days of Close Encounters, that may have been one of the only friendly type alien movies.
Yeah.
Now there's been so many types of movies about aliens and cable shows all across the spectrum. So and also, movies aren't as big a deal as they used to be. It's a lot of it's moved to episodic TV. And so not to downplay Mr. Spielberg, who I met during the filming of Close Encounters and since then, but I just don't know if movies have as much ability to impact the overall zeitgeist as they used to, because we're so much more fragmented in our entertainment habits now.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I do find it interesting that Spielberg's coming out with like a Close Encounters, like a serious approach to this, topic. And you've got Joseph Kosinski and Jeremy Bruckheimer putting out a film kind of like All the President's Men about the UFO topic, with David Grush consulting. I think he's even getting a producer credit as well. You've got this, what's it called? The Age of Disclosure documentary produced by Dan Farah coming out, premiered at South by. I just feel like there's some big, right? I mean, the Joseph Kosinski, he's got F1 coming out this summer with Brad Pitt. I mean, this isn't just anybody, right? He put out the Top Gun Maverick movie. I'm just so curious, why these big hitters are coming out. It's because I think, right, that Hollywood isn't going to make a movie or something if they don't think there'll be an audience for it, right? They would want to see that subject taken seriously. So not like in the vein of Aliens or whatever, right? Predator or something like that, right? Some scary, it's different. I don't know. I feel like there is some sort of sea change. What do you think?
Don't know.
Yeah, that's fair.
It's hard. We're the frogs in the water that might be getting hotter. It's hard to know.
Oh gosh, that analogy is horrible and most likely true. What are some myths about your father that you've heard that you sort of want to bust for people, or you're tired of hearing, or misunderstandings either about him or his work or yourself?
I don't know if there's a lot. I mean, I think people will often say that he went from a skeptic to a believer, and it's really a semantic quibble I have with that scientists don't often traffic with the word belief. It's more you accept the data. And I would say that in those kind of shorthand references that people make to him, wasn't really a believer. You don't believe in the sun. You accept the data that the sun is there. You accept the data that there's a phenomena happening, whether or not it comports with your existing views on the world. You just have to be ready to, as inconvenient as it may be, accept the idea that the evidence is taking you somewhere you didn't expect to go, and then at the same time resist the urge to figure out or to assign the best available answer. Just leave it unanswered for some time, perhaps forever, as we talked about before. But I don't think there's really a lot of mistakes or myths about him. I mean, he was a professional male dancer, and let's just get that out of the way. So,
the pipe. He just had the pipe, and that's
it. It was a unique shtick on the runway.
Oh man.
Well, he was actually in college an equestrian trick rider, which is something that's really interesting.
Really? Wow,
Yep.
that is no. I
Yep.
mean, I'm from Texas. I've definitely been around horses a lot. That is no small feat. Let's put it
Yeah.
that way. Yeah, that's interesting. I wonder how he used those skills. Maybe he looked at, you know, getting through ufology as that, like it's just equestrian trick riding, right?
I
And
don't
just
know if it's, I mean,
balance.
I know he did that. Apparently he did that because the stable master's daughter was cute. So I think that's what explained that.
Wow. So he's just like all us guys, right? Just
Yeah.
chasing a woman we're interested in. That's cool. That's great. I saw another segment, famous segment with your dad on the Dick Cavett show with Carl Sagan, and I'm curious what kind of effect. I mean, I don't know if you know what kind of effect that had on your father. Did he enjoy those types of interactions?
Not really. He was a professor, and professors, as I know, being a accidental adjunct, like to have time to explore a point. And UFOs are not a simple matter.
Yeah.
But TV is, even back then, was sound bitey. And it's hard to really get into a weighty conversation of something like that in between commercials with somebody that's somewhat adversarial. And he had like an ongoing debate with Carl Sagan.
Yeah.
So he didn't feel that that was like the best media for him. I mean, he did a lot of TV appearances, no doubt, but yeah, I don't think he felt that they did great service to the phenomenon.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. It just makes me wonder in the age of podcasting how he would be flourishing or if he would even be into that,
Yeah,
right? You would be able to have these long conversations and kind of get into, you know, the more nuances of this, which I'm sure he would
yeah,
prefer.
and with people like you who come to the table a whole lot more knowledgeable than Dick Cavett or Johnny Carson.
Sure. No, that's a fair point. And Dick Cavett is, just known for, that kind of shtick, right? So no, I get it for sure. I mean, that totally makes sense. You know, what do you what do you think is let's say someone new's getting into the top, right? You're sitting on an airplane, you meet somebody, but they're like, okay, how do I get into this? I don't know anything about this. What do you suggest to them to start, or is that even something you think about? I don't know. Is there I don't know, a book,
Yeah, yeah, it's
something? I don't know.
I don't feel this need to evangelize and to corrupt people into the phenomena. I think the universe needs to tap you for things that you're really going to lean into, however it may do that. Um,
That's
you
fair.
know, my father's books are a good place to start for like a basic primer from a scientific point of view. But nowadays, you search online either through Google or one of the answer engines, as I call them, the LLMs,
Yeah.
and you will, if you spend a little time, you will gravitate to things that resonate with you, whether it's a YouTube video, podcast, books, movies, etc. And it's hard to really know just sitting next to someone on an airplane really what the best avenue for them is. I
Yeah,
will, if they start talking about it, I will mention why I think there's why a reasonable person can believe that there's a phenomena going on, and I'll spend time on that, and then they're off to the races.
yeah, no, that's fair. Um, yeah, no, that's totally fair. You know, Blue Book is such a cornerstone, maybe in the timeline of studied ufology, at least in the United States. How it fits in, the brick in this wall. I'm curious just how you see Blue Book, like how you describe it or how you talk about it.
Well, it was to our knowledge, the longest running official Air Force or governmental agency or department to formally study UFOs. And my father was the scientific consultant. But almost from the very beginning, it wasn't a serious scientific research effort. It was a PR exercise to tamp down hysteria. So it was a very frustrating involvement for my father, who was a scientist. But it gave him, as we talked about, a front row center to this phenomenon and access to information and an ability to influence, not control, how the government proceeded. But, you know, it was, you know, and I alluded to before, you know, the government is engaged in disinformation campaigns, and, you know, I don't follow the latest congressional testimony or this or that whistleblower. I just don't care. They're a bad faith, corrupt central actor. And if I was an Air Force general, I wouldn't divulge jack shit. It's not my job to better humanity or lessen dependence on fossil fuels. It's my job to kick ass, and that's what I'm going to do. And no pasty-faced pencil pusher on Capitol Hill waving a subpoena in my face is going to change my mind. I'm Jack Nicholson on the wall, so shut the fuck up. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, I get it. Why do you think there is this stigma? Like, why did they try to put out disinformation campaign? Why would they care if people were interested in this or not?
So think about, and a lot of this was through the lens of the Air Force. So think about, what is the job of the Air Force? To exert superiority over foes and protect us from foes. Well, part of that mission, a bit larger, is to create the perception amongst the citizenry that they are protecting us. To have this perception of security. So if we feel relatively confident that the Russians or the Chinese or North Koreans aren't going to lob missiles on us, that's great. But if there's this rising tide of perception that, hey, it's not the Russians and Chinese we got to worry about, it's the Pleiadians, and we are powerless to stop them, that's going to kind of put a dent in the armor of the Air Force's sacred ability to protect us. So, yeah, if we can't stamp out these reports, if we can't rubber stamp solved on all the cases that come in to the satisfaction of the populace, let's just make it all look silly and put it to bed. That's a perfectly reasonable approach for them to do in light of their mission of making us feel that we are protected from anything that enters the airspace.
Sure. So it could just be the same reason, like if we had a crash UFO or bodies or whatever, then the same thought, right? We need to make it look silly so people aren't looking into it, right? Like,
either make it look silly or shut people up so they don't talk about it.
Yeah, because I started thinking, like, why doesn't the government put out disinformation campaigns against Santa Claus or Jesus Christ, or, you know what I mean? Like, why would
Whoa, I'm not touching that one, mister.
Yeah, well, I just mean religion, right? Like, what? It's like people's beliefs, right? Why is there no? But because there's no, the safety issue you're talking about, for instance, isn't there with that, right? Nobody's worried that Santa is good. He comes once a year. I mean, that's how it goes, right? So, but the idea of aliens or UFOs flying around, okay, we have to take care of this and handle this.
So, Patrick, you're saying that Bad Santa wasn't funded by the government?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. If you're going to ride that horse, go right ahead.
I mean, I'm into conspiracy theories, so that's my top one. Yeah. Wait till I tell you about the Easter Bunny. No, look, yeah, I just find it curious, like, where this is, because the argument always comes up, okay, no matter what this is, if it's a psyop, that's also interesting, right? So you think, okay, yeah, they're psyoping us because they're worried about how they're viewed in protecting us, essentially, or right, or we seem inferior to our adversaries if there's things flying around we can't control. But then we'd have to say, well, they're also dealing with it. So this is a human sort of thing. I don't know. There's just so many threads to pull in this. It becomes confusing. I don't know. Do you feel as confused about this topic as I do?
I feel confused about a lot of things.
Well, now you sound like my wife. That's what she says to me. I'm confused about everything. Yeah, it's just a lot to take in, and maybe because I cover it every day and I talk to a lot of people, and there's just so many stories, and it's just hard to keep track. Like, say, for instance, psionics, right? Have you heard about this new term and people are talking about this? Consciousness, mind to mind, connection with the entities and potentially controlling these craft. And I mean, what are your thoughts on some of these ideas?
Yeah, no idea. I mean, I grew up in a scientific household that was curiously open. And my father, for 3 years in a row, when I was about 10 years old, took me to an annual ESP conference. So, I think it's intellectually dishonest to say there's no such thing as ESP or whatever it is, unless you've delved into the matter to some degree. You can always say, yeah, I don't care about UFOs. I got to pay rent. Fine. But to say there are no such things as aliens, if you haven't looked at it, that's just lazy. Yeah. With psychic phenomena, there's a fair amount of evidence to support it. Sure. And I don't know if you're familiar with the Monroe Institute. Yep. I'm their CFO. I met Bob Monroe at one of these ESP conferences when I was a kid, and have bought from time to time sound technology products from the Monroe Institute. And 2 years ago at Conscious Life Expo, they had a booth there, and I just walked right up and said, hey, you guys need a CFO? And they said, yes. So I've been their CFO for 2 years, and just before our talk here was on a board call for the Monroe Institute.
Wow. So you wouldn't say you 100% believe it. You're just open to and trying to see what the data is, or that really has.
I believe in the ability for consciousness to leave the body. I'll say that. And I'm very open to all sorts of ideas like ESP, etc., sure. Remote viewing and the like.
Yeah, like what is it? Astral projection.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of what's under the umbrella: remote viewing, astral projection, telepathy, telekinesis.
Yeah.
What's the coolest thing you've witnessed in that field?
Well, I've had some interesting experiences myself, but I just think what Bob Monroe wrote about, and having met him, he's just a very believable guy, very credible witness, as my father would call it. And so many people associated with the Monroe Institute, either staff or people who have participated in programs, have very compelling stories.
Yeah, no, that's fair. So you said you've had some experiences yourself. Is that not something you talk about, or?
Well, yeah, so it's like my father. He saw a couple things in the sky that were interesting to him. But if I have any value to add to this field, it's not so much any personal experience I've had. And part of that is the more I talk about a personal experience I have, the less objective people will think I am. Like, oh, okay, Paul says he saw an alien, so, he drank the Kool-Aid. I think it's more helpful if I talk about patterns that I might see, or connections I can make, things I can tease out of data, and new ideas about potential origins, letting the chips fall where they may without a horse in the race. I just think it's more valuable for me if I'm to bring value to this field in sort of with that mindset.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
Now I am working on a protocol to help experiencers, whether it's aliens, DMT, ghosts, etc., should they so choose, to demonstrate the objective reality of their encounters. I'd like to help people prove that these things are true. I call that exposure. Like I said, I don't care about the government and disclosure. I think we can move the needle forward by more productive conversations between scientists and experiencers. And I understand both mindsets. I've grown up in both. So for me, if we can get experiencers, again, those who want to follow some guidelines to bring back what scientists would feel as evidence and have better conversations there, that could really be revolutionary. And then if the U.S. government wants to hop on the caboose of the train, they're welcome, but they're not driving that train.
Yeah, no, I like that. So, okay, so that's interesting. You're gonna be at Contact in the Desert, right? Is that
Yes, I will.
is part of your presentation this what you're talking about, these new protocols?
Most likely, yes. Yes.
Yeah, right on. Do you plan on having any like live demonstrations of anything, or does that even apply to what you're presenting?
I'll talk about it with an audience, and I have sort of a partial evidentiary technique. And it consists of, I have what I call a VE pin, a verifiable evidence pin. It's a 5 alphanumeric digit character or string. And I invite people to tell me what that is. And that's either through remote viewing, clairvoyance, what have you. And that is one proof protocol. And if people have the ability to do that, that's great. I've had a bunch of people try, and they've not done it so far. But for me, if they can do that, that's evidence of some type of awareness, and make a direct hit, and the odds are vanishingly low that they do that by chance. That's really indicative of some kind of knowledge that humans should not have. And if they can do that, now let's really investigate further. So that's one aspect of the protocol.
Yeah, no, that's cool. Wow. I hope I get to make it when I'm there for that. That sounds really interesting. It's something I'm really interested in right now, is that aspect, consciousness, psionics. I'm going down this journey with that specifically. You talked earlier about patterns and maybe new theories of origin or whatever. You know what? I guess, yeah, maybe this will tie in. When you talk about ESP, let's say, for instance, do you connect that with ufology? Like, does that go together?
Yeah, it's a good question. We have a tendency, especially in the West, to localize symptoms. Like, we have pain in our knee, so it must be coming from our knee.
Yeah.
As opposed to thinking holistically. And I think the same kind of striated thinking permeates our categorization of phenomena. I'm not at all sure that aliens and ghosts and DMT entities are fundamentally different. There may well be this common substrate from which various phenomena emerge, and they either instantiate in different ways at different times, or we perceive them in different ways because of cultural biases. But I just have this honking suspicion that just maybe there's a relationship between these phenomena. And indeed, one of the talks I give is what I consider the nexus between aliens, DMT, and Bitcoin.
Wow. Okay. That's interesting. Bitcoin, yep. DMT, and aliens.
Yep. The Holy Trinity.
That's a perfect Friday night conversation right there. Okay. So we got like 10 minutes left. So I want to make sure that I get this in before we go here. I did see something on your Twitter about DMT. So what is sort of your, and have you tried DMT before, right? Or no? Or
Yes, I have. So, by way of background, I may or may not have done a lot of drugs when I was young, and I may or may not have had very long hair. And if I did, then I may have given it up at some point because I was just messing around, and I prefer clarity over distortion.
sure.
But some years ago, I was with a friend of mine named Nova Spivak, who crash landed tardigrades on the moon, which is a pretty cool calling card. And he knew about my father, and he asked me, "Hey, where did your father think UFOs came from?" I said, "I don't know, maybe interdimensional." He says, "You should read a book called Alien Information Theory." I said, "Alien Information Theory? That's like the sexiest book title ever. What's it about?" He said, DMT. And I said, "Yeah, I don't know what that is." And he looks at me like, "Oh, you're somebody who should, I think, would know what DMT is." Okay.
Yeah.
And he said, well, the author, a guy named Andrew Gallimore, who's a PhD neurobiologist, theorizes that DMT really stands alone. And DMT is the most powerful psychedelic we know of, and is the chemical ingredient of ayahuasca, which is much better known.
Yeah.
And that DMT may not be a hallucinogenic psychedelic, but actually a plant medicine technology that allows you to see something that's very real. I said, fascinating. What that got? Oh, that's essentially maybe another dimension. And my father thought UFOs came from another dimension, perhaps. Maybe DMT, because I can't do a CE5 and summon craft, maybe I can try DMT, see if I get to that dimension, do kind of an end around the whole government disclosure bullshit, and just go to the source. All right, that's cool. Then 2 hours later, I met this new guy who starts telling me what he does, and he does breath work, and he facilitates DMT sessions. Like, whoa, did I just get double tapped in one day for DMT? And yes, I did. And so he kindly launched me on my DMT journey. And the first time I did it, I had a breakthrough experience, and I asked, "Hey, are you what we perceive to be behind UFOs and aliens?" And the answer I got was, "We can't explain in a way that you would understand." Like, wow. And so I became fascinated by DMT. Wow. And Andrew Gallimore, who wrote Alien Information Theory, I saw was speaking at Contact in the Desert 2 years ago. So I pitched the organizers of the conference and Gallimore on us doing a joint presentation at the conference on UFOs and aliens, and DMT. Wow. And everybody agreed, and we did. So I've become good friends with Andrew, and we've worked together on several projects. And I just feel that there's this tantalizing possibility that DMT may not be hallucinogenic and may be a gateway to another dimension that is perhaps inhabited by what we feel are aliens.
Yeah. Wow. There's a lot to unpack there. So you're saying this entity that you saw when you took DMT said, "I can't explain," when you asked it that question, "I can't explain it to you," or whatever he said to you. Was that like vocal? You heard that vocally? You felt like that was some sort of telepathic thing? I've never done DMT, but I have. I was in a band in my 20s, so I've definitely experimented and had some fun. But I also know those experiences are hard to trust.
Yeah. And look, let me say this. Even though a hallmark of what many people say after doing DMT is that it feels hyper real, doesn't mean that it is. And so this is a long shot. It's a Hail Mary, but I've done it more than a few times now and have had a lot of experiences with other people. And and Andrew Gallimore makes a really good neuroscientific case for why it may be real, what the exact pharmacological effects are in the brain. And so I'm not saying that these things are real, but that, look, I have a lot of friends, Steve Bassett, Richard Dolan, Danny Sheehan, and others who are working on disclosure. They got that covered. Zagazoon, fellas. I'm going to go this way here and see if I can't make progress there.
Sure.
And have some very transformative experiences in any case along the way.
That's a great attitude. I couldn't agree more with that, right? Like, who cares? Well, either way, it'll be fun, right?
Yeah, and
along the way.
If I can find it, I'll show you an image I created in AI, which I think exemplifies the link between aliens, DMT, and Bitcoin. I don't know if you can see that here.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Look at that.
Yeah.
Oh, my gosh. Wow.
That's the vibe. That's the vibe.
So that's the vibe you see visually when you take DMT? Is that what it... I've never done it, so I don't know.
Well, this is DMT, aliens, and Bitcoin together. So I see all kinds of things. I see all everything you can imagine. And I can't. It's not that I blanket endorse it. It's a very powerful psychedelic. People need to be very careful. But I just it's a transcendent experience.
Yeah. No, last question here for you is kind of about this, just to, have you seen this stuff about seeing code in DMT? With the laser?
That's a good friend of mine named Danny Goller.
Yeah.
And I've done ceremonies with Danny, and I was just in a recent documentary that he filmed talking about it.
Very cool. So,
and I've not been able to see the code, but I really like Danny. I like his approach. He's a very honest, very intelligent guy who just may be on to one of the most revolutionary things in history. Big applause for Danny, and keep going, man.
Yeah, you encourage the
research. Oh yeah, and he's got a good, open, scientific attitude towards it.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. So you took DMT, looked at a laser, and didn't see code.
Correct.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I've definitely been playing with trying DMT, in a controlled setting, maybe ayahuasca, some sort of ceremony like that. Do you think you get the same effects? I know it's based on the same, but it is two different things. It's like taking a gummy versus smoking a joint, right? When you come to like marijuana, right? Like it's different. It's a different feeling.
It's very different. Ayahuasca is it's not just the 4, 5, 6 hours of the active ayahuasca. You're on a dieta for the week before that, and especially that day. Whereas DMT, if I host a ceremony, we have dinner, talk about it, drink, eat, and then do DMT right after that. Yeah. And the one thing that perhaps the most common sensation is you just can't believe how fast acting it is. And even Andrew Gallimore, who had studied it for years, had dedicated his life to it, was asked, hey, so you had studied it for like 6 years before you did it, so you're pretty prepared. He goes, hell no, because you cannot be prepared for smoking something in whatever form you do it, and how fast reality will change for you. And then how fast it changes back. You just cannot comprehend that.
Yeah, that sounds like one time. I've only done it once, but I took sativa.
Whoa, yeah, okay.
Sativa. Yeah, one time in my 20s, some friends.
Salvia?
Salvia, yeah, salvia, sorry. Salvia. And that, it was instant, like when the smoke left my mouth, I was gone. I mean, gone, beyond gone. And then I just snapped out of it after, like, I don't know how, it felt like hours, but it was only like 15 minutes actually. It sounds like that, which was interesting. That was an interesting experience. That's what I imagine with DMT, because that felt hyper real, but it wasn't, and weird things were happening. I could see people that weren't there, and they looked like they were there. That's what was weird, and like walking into walls and like gone. And I'm like, what the? I mean, it broke my brain, to be honest with you, because other drugs you knew you were high. Like there was a sense of, I'm not right. Yeah. So what I'm seeing isn't right. But that was a different feeling. And I'll never forget that, to be honest. It scared me. I never wanted to do that again.
Yeah, you know,
To be
that's
honest.
similar in how you describe to DMT, in that when I do DMT, I don't feel I'm high or drugged. I feel sober. I feel
Yeah.
hyper clarity. And um, I have not done salvia, but I have a lot of friends who've done it, and it's about 50-50 for those. Everyone says it's intense, and at
Yeah.
least half the people say, not again, like you. That I
Yeah.
do not want any part of that.
Yeah.
I don't get that with DMT, where you know, I've facilitated for a lot of people either in depth or just a quick puff, and all of
They're
them,
interested in
if
it.
not all of them, are
Yeah.
like, "Wow, hey, that was really cool or meaningful." And you know, it's not always wine and roses and pleasant from moment to moment. I view this as work, and it can
Yeah.
be confronting fears or regrets or things like that. It can be very therapeutic, and I'll have experiences where I just cry my eyes out. But I'm happy to have gone through it.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. Well, look, Paul, I know you got to go. I really appreciate you taking the time today. I really enjoyed this conversation. It flew by. We'll have to do a round two at some point because I definitely have more questions. You're fascinating to talk to be honest with you. You have a great personality, and I enjoy the back and forth. I don't meet many people like you in this field. Let's just put it that way. This was really fun for me. So
Cool.
thank you.
Thanks.